good afternoon, and welcome to my Central Virginia garden on this early September day. I'm going to give a garden tour. This is, I usually do about one full garden tour a month, so this video will be a bit longer than my usual ones. But for those of you who enjoy garden tours, I hope you enjoy this one. I'm going to show, this is going to be warts and all. This is, there's the good and the bad and the ugly and the in-between, and show you it all. I've had some good things happen with my garden this year, and then I've had some things that have been somewhat problematic. But I'll just go ahead and show you how things are faring. Yeah, things are winding down. That's always a little bit of a sad time, but things are also amazingly abundant. I mean, just look at the stand of zinnias behind me. And I'm always so amazed at these. The pollinators just flock to them. They're always full of butterflies and bees. And what's really amazing about these is most of them are self-seeded from last year. So let's just start by doing a little walkabout on the outside of my garden, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. Those of you who have not been to my channel before, I am an organic gardener, and I am also a no-till gardener, or a no-dig gardener. So you can check out some of my other videos about how I created these various beds. Let's get started on the outside of my garden. This is the part that's not fenced, and then we'll go into the inside of the garden and I'll show you that. I'm standing about midway down the pathway here, and you can just see I'm on a little path that is between the border of the garden and the outside of the garden. You can hardly see it, but I have over in that behind these beautiful sage is a row of blackberry plants that I just planted. They produced for the first time this year. And in front of me, I have some blueberry plants and a whole lot of grass that needs to be cut. That's one of the warts. And so I think I made a decision about what I'm going to do for next year. And that is when the fall season comes and everything dies back, I'm going to go ahead and put wood chips in these rows. What I mean by wood chipping, you can see down these aisles, I have everything, the paths clearly marked. Now, why wouldn't I wood chip? Well, it's a lot of work. I mean, the more paths that I wood chip, the more wood chips I have to move. Now, here's a stand of lavender, and this has already had one beautiful bloom this year, and I think it's getting ready to do another bloom. It certainly smells fantastic. I sort of discovered a trick about growing both the sage and the lavender, and that is don't water them. Even in the drought, these barely got watered, and they have been so much happier. Previous years when I tried to grow lavender, I just couldn't get anything to grow. So I made a little special patch here, and it is just growing like crazy, and the whole thing smells fantastic. The same with this one single blue sage plant. Can you believe this is just one plant, and it's so magnificently huge? Here is one of my distressing things that happened in the garden. This is a pumpkin plant. It's just, this pumpkin should be much, much, much bigger. It's a Cinderella pumpkin, but as you can see, this plant has totally given up the ghost. I think it succumbed to a vine borer, and also it was plagued by squash bugs. And I am just not happy about my pumpkin production this year. And I do have some other pumpkins planted out of this no-dig bed. You can see the dead one. That's the plant that was planted elsewhere, and it bit the dust. This plant here is doing, these two are doing pretty well. However, I don't see any pumpkins on this particular plant yet, so that is an issue. This is a Seminole pumpkin plant, and it tends to do pretty well. Growing up this trellis, you can see my snake beans. Now, this one is totally funky. Definitely got to pick that one up. But I have loads of them growing underneath this trellis. Look at them, or on top of this trellis. They are so much fun to grow, and they're also very good to eat. Check out this celosia. This is just an amazing, amazing planting. So I've got a big, huge tomato row growing. Over here are some of my cayenne peppers, and there's some Marconi peppers. Tucked into the tomatoes, you see the Ahhh chin chin. I've already harvested a bunch of those. Plant full of serrano peppers, and I've harvested a bunch of those already too. And this area is what I call my melon patch. Now it is drying back. I've also got pumpkins coming out of this side as well. All right, there's a little Seminole pumpkin down there. Now I do have some watermelons that are coming in, and some cantaloupes. This cantaloupe is getting nibbled on. Will go in with me and will become a delicious dessert. These are Edisto melons. You can see these amazing sized tomatoes. These are Kellogg breakfast tomatoes. They're yellow tomatoes. I have just harvested a whole bunch, so these are yet to ripen. But check out the size of some of these. They've been like massive, massive, and very delicious. In here is my sweet potato patch, and there are some watermelon plants tucked in. You may know that sweet potatoes are related to morning glories, and their vine grows sort of like that. And the flowers look like that as well. I'm really hoping that I get sweet potatoes this year. The last 2 years I've had vole damage, but the fact that these plants are actually thriving is a good thing. Growing up this side of the trellis is a butternut squash plant. And I've picked a couple of butternut squash already, but I do anticipate some more. Here I have a little hedge of these were yellow jalapenos that I harvested, and I'll get a few more off of that plant. There's some pimento peppers here, and then some of the little Hansel egg or little fingers eggplants that I grew in 20-gallon pots this year. I had a tomato growing with this basil that got harvested, but here you can see that the carrots I planted about a week and a half ago have sprouted and are starting to grow. So they'll come up in this grow bag here. I always love seeing all the happy bees in the garden. I have loads and loads and loads of peppers growing inside this fenced area. All sorts of sweet peppers on this row. Here's another trellis archway that frames the edge of a path. And up it I have growing hops so that my husband can make his beer. He's a brewer. And I also have a passion flower vine. These flowers bloom for one day and then they fade, but they are very, very beautiful. This is a sage plant that I planted from seed the last year, and it really, again, I have pretty much neglected this one, but it really is a very, very happy camper starting off and growing. So I'll be drying some of this sage. This is perennial. This is lemon balm, which has exploded outside of the garden, and I'm gonna have to just sort of start cutting that back. I also have some oregano here at the base of the hops. I grow a lot of herbs mixed in part because sometimes they can create a barricade or barrier and help deter certain critters. I have a lot of these French mallows growing, and they are perennial, and they also self-seed. Really gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous flower. And the beginning of the summer, I had the deer or someone came along and munched them back, but I'm really happy to see how they've just been growing. And now it's time to go inside the garden. I've got lots of fall things starting up in here. You can see that I've got my brassica tenting up right here, and that's to keep all sorts of things that like to eat brassicas out. Underneath the netting, I have 4 Brussels sprouts plants. Those are the ones in the back there. Some cabbage. I have had one cabbage plant die off, it looks like. And then I have planted a bunch of broccoli plants as well. I think I've got 8 broccoli plants in here. Then I came along a couple of days ago, now that these plants are growing, and I just direct seeded some radishes in here. Just a few things that will grow up in between and underneath and be harvestable earlier than the broccolis. I don't like to have space being wasted. So I was like, no wasted space. Kale, this is Premier Kale that's starting up. I've got to thin this out. These are some watermelon radishes that I planted. That is a violet that I really don't want growing in here. I have volunteer tomatoes growing up here. And this is a volunteer bean plant. So long cucumbers growing up here. I pulled them in earlier in August. And now I've got a second cucumber plants coming up here. And they're making their way up, intertwined among the bean plants. These are lima beans. And they're not ready yet, but they soon will be. These ones, the red Worcester pole beans, take a long time to come to maturity. I have some Chinese noodle beans here, and I have some second planting of cucumber plants coming up here. And so they're starting to climb, and they will continue to climb and produce into September, I think, or probably October if the weather stays good. Got a hedge of tomatoes over here. I've been picking them, so there's not a whole lot ripe right now. All different kinds of heirloom tomatoes on this side. Here I planted some spinach. Oh, and look, I've got a sprout. I planted these on Saturday. Today is, let's see, today is Wednesday. So that's really pretty quick sprouting for this spinach. Check out that huge stand of marigolds. As I said, it's kind of a jungle. Things in August, things grow crazy. Here are two 20-gallon cloth grow bags that have potatoes planted in them. And these potatoes are really now flopping over. They are doing great. And I imagine that I'll be able to harvest those probably in another few weeks. They're starting to flop, which they do, and then they'll start to die back. Here's another grow bag of carrots. Here are my beets that I have planted for the season. You can see that this one got eaten. I've had a big problem with grasshoppers and obviously something here. Look, it's all the way eaten down. I might have to come in and put a cover on this just to keep whatever it is away. At this point, my garden is not the tidiest in the world, but it's still producing food and we're eating every day, pretty much exclusively from the garden in terms of our veggies. Oh, I have basil growing everywhere and marigolds growing everywhere. And here's a random zinnia. Over here, you can see this is Roseland White. These are little pickling cucumbers and they're quite delicious. And this is a squash plant. I had pulled squash that was growing here. And this one is just, you know, on its merry way. You can see the ground cherry plant that's dying back. And here is my trellis with Trumpicina squash growing up it. And I've had melons growing on some Trumpicina squash starting off here. Been pulling Trumpicina squash off as they're young, eating them like zucchini. Here's one that did not get germinated. Now I planted about a week ago lettuce under here, hoping that the shade provided would have cooled the soil enough so that the lettuce plants would germinate. And I'm happy to say I have fantastic germination. I wasn't expecting that good germination. Hopefully they'll continue to grow. I've got some on each side. Now this was my trellis of poinsettia cucumbers that just went crazy this year and were so bountiful. I have another poinsettia cucumber plant that's starting up the trellis here, you can see. And it actually has a little cucumber that's formed down there. This I planted a week ago. This is the lacinato kale. So there should be a few of those coming up. This is my stand of lima beans. These are Henderson limas. And this is where I was having some trouble with the baby stink bugs that had gotten in and were eating a lot of the blossoms off. There are some beans that have formed. You can see they're not quite ready to pick yet. But down in the lower part of this, I've got some decent beanage. These are 1,000 head kale. I will probably, once this one gets a little bit bigger, I will probably move this one back to the back. Massive lemon balm, and loads and loads of peppers growing in this row. I've been picking peppers. We've been eating peppers for weeks now. So there's loads, always something getting ready to harvest. And they'll keep going as long as the weather is good. You see all of the interplanting of marigolds and basil that I do wherever I have planted peppers or tomatoes. I interplant basil and marigolds. And look at the pollinators that just flock around. This is one plant, by the way. This is African blue spice basil. You can check out the video that I did, the short that I did on this type of spice basil, as well as some others that I grow. Over in this thicket are more tomatoes growing. I guess we'll go up on this final side. Here you see my huge pyramid of Worcester red Indian lima beans. And they are red beans when they're mature. I have so many. You can see they're coming in. They come in late. They take a long time to mature, but this plant is just loaded with blooms, and it'll be coming in probably. These beans, I'll be picking them in late September. Over here I have some fall things planted. These are various types of choys, along with a couple of random old potatoes that were from previous years that I guess just remained in the ground. So I think we have various kinds of chijam sai here and bok choy, prize choy that are growing in here. It's doing all right. You can see that there's some flea beetle damage on it. Those little tiny holes. Brassicas kind of get hammered by flea beetles. If I were a nice person and a good person, I probably should have put some, I probably should have covered all of this with netting. So I did tell you I'd show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. But there's so much beautiful in here that when something goes wrong, I just don't get upset. And so that's my garden, early September version. I will probably do another full garden tour towards the end of September, beginning of October, just depending. But don't you just love to garden? I sure do. And if you love to garden and you love to cook what you grow, this might be a channel for you. So I do encourage you, if you haven't already, to subscribe. Make sure you check the notifications button so you can see whenever I post. My style is kind of what you see. It's a slice of life vlog type of thing. I am learning gardening. I have mastered some things, but I have a lot more to learn. But I do enjoy sharing what I've done, and I love talking about the garden, and I love interacting with my followers, which has been a real pleasure as I got this channel started. So do consider subscribing, and I thank you so much for watching and taking this tour with me. I hope you're well. Take care. Bye.